Here you can see a Russian tank destroyed by Ukrainian forces. Here's another Russian tank destroyed. Now a Ukrainian soldier next to a captured Russian BMP-2. Ukrainian artillerymen trained by no other than the British Army. And lastly, a Ukrainian helicopter flying over Snake Island, which has recently been abandoned by the Russians. Everything is fine. Hold on. I think I forgot something. Alright, give me a second. Tanks, Snake Island. They're HIMARS. The NATO HIMARS bombed Russian ammunition depots, and they even targeted a Russian airfield at Melitopol. What else? That's pretty much it. Right, I almost forgot. Lysychansk has fallen. Not even a week after part 1, Severodonetsk has fallen, and Russian forces are now in full control of Luhansk region, one of the two separatist republics that the Kremlin wanted to liberate. The first major political victory for Russia, a small tiny detail. Here you have Chechen forces entering the battered city of Lysychansk. A man from the 6th Regiment of Cossacks waving the Soviet victory banner over the Lysychansk administration building, followed by the Chechen and the same Cossacks chanting together, Allahu Akbar, Akhmat is power, Cossacks of power, together we are power. And here are rare images of the residents of Lysychansk welcoming Russian forces. But it has to be said that the civilians that stay behind are most likely to be pro-Russian. Hi and welcome to History Legends. Here are the latest news about the Russo-Ukrainian war. Here we cut the BS and talk about what the media doesn't tell you. As always, information changes by the hour, so if you have any new info, just comment it below. If you're new to the channel, make sure to check out my Ukraine playlist so you don't miss anything I've said in the past. And sadly, more and more of my videos are targeted by limited or no ads, so make sure to subscribe to my Patreon or my PayPal to keep the show running. A huge thanks to all those that have already helped, and welcome to the headquarters. By the way, I also wanted to announce that I'm planning to release some non-Ukraine war related videos in the coming days. With that being said, there's still some Ukrainian forces, some pockets of resistance between the south of Lysychansk and Bilaura. Question is, nobody knows how many and how long they can last. I had to subscribe to the British newspaper The Times. I know, but I had to go through the paywall. And the reason is because they posted an interesting article. It was titled Severodonetsk Last Stand, Brilliant Maneuver or Reckless Waste of Life. For the first time in Western media, you can sense some implied criticism of the strategy followed by the Ukraine command in Donbas. The article is essentially describing what I've been telling you for 2 months. 2 months! Just now, the mainstream media is catching up with the cold hard reality, with the facts. Look, I was advocating for Ukrainian withdrawal from Severodonetsk and even Luhansk for a long time, because militarily speaking, it does not make sense to hold this place. And I saw the Russian flanking maneuver come from a mile away, 1.7 kilometers for Europeans. And I certainly wasn't the only one raising the alarm bell. Here, a Ukrainian soldier by the name of Vitaly. He says the battle was a costly performance. It was a political point to hold it, aka a PR stunt. Vitaly goes on with disgust. A general who argued for an earlier retreat to defend the city was rotated off the battlefield. One of the only generals with common sense was sacked. 100% Zelensky has some staff members drawing arrows on map preparing Operation Buffoon, the storming of Moscow. The Ukraine soldier continues, we are already retreating our positions within Lysychansk. The Russians are shelling harder than ever to try and take the HIMARS out. When we used to get hit by 10 missiles, now we get 100. Then the Times covers the story of Tatiana Ignatchenko, a war correspondent. From her vantage point, she has a grim overview of battlefield losses, which Ukrainian officials recently estimated at 100 to 200 soldiers a day. She said, there are no official numbers, but we have our own count. We see the bodies come through. If you read between the lines, it's pretty clear. Casualties, Ukrainian casualties are much higher than officially reported. I'm just thinking, was the battle for Luhansk worth it? Would it not have been better to just withdraw and save the life of thousands of men? Because this is the same result now. The battle of the Twin Cities. The Twin Cities is a nickname for the urban agglomeration of Severodonetsk and Lysychansk. It was really the centerpiece of the battles in the past few weeks. Now, I remember a lot of trolls asking, where's that encirclement that I was talking about for a long time? Or what happened to that Popasna breakthrough? Here's the situation before the Popasna breakthrough, and here's after. And the worst thing is that the Ukrainian government turned Severodonetsk in some sort of political objective into a symbol of resistance. That this is where they would hold the enemy hordes. Essentially, this is where they would win the war. But by doing so, they burned all bridges and dug their own grave. Nobody in their right mind could actually believe that the Ukrainians could hold Severodonetsk. As the Ukraine command asked for weeks to withdraw from this untenable position and instead reinforce defenses at Lysychansk across the river. In the end, losing the city would have inevitable consequences on the morale of the Ukrainian army. And in turn, I asked myself whether or not it's the Russians that actually laid a trap. Ukrainians did something very similar to what the Germans did at Stalingrad, stubbornly fighting for a city that has no military significance, turning it into a political objective, sending more and more men into the meat grinder at the expense of the troops on both flanks. All the Russians had to do was to pull out their World War II textbooks, and the rest is history. The worst thing is that after the Popasna breakthrough, the writing was on the wall. Holding this entire salient would put the Ukrainian army in a tenuous situation. Now looking back at my previous video, I laid out 4 options on how the Russians could attack Lysychansk. Turned out the Russians combined option 4, the elimination of the Zoloty grouping, with option 3, to push north and squeeze Ukrainian defenders at Lysychansk. Combining these 2 maneuvers was expected. But what surprised me is how the Russians also added option 1, a pontoon crossing. The moment the Ukrainians left the area north of Lysychansk, the Russians immediately grabbed this opportunity, and through multiple pontoon bridges, they crossed over and pushed 17 kilometers in only 2 days right into the city center and took over all of Lysychansk. The city fell in essentially 3 days. Let's not underestimate the opposing side. Russians proved to be capable of coordinating a complex set of maneuvers, which they haven't been able to before. In only a couple days, they captured 2 major urban centers that benefited from industrial areas, a high ground, and a river. You can't get better than that for a defensive position. Now, according to unconfirmed reports that I read, so take it with a pinch of salt. But apparently, during the final days of battle for the twin cities of Severodonetsk and Lysychansk, plus the hasty withdrawal, Ukrainians are said to have abandoned 300 pieces of heavy equipment and lost 10,000 killed or wounded. I don't know if the situation is really that bad. But during the interview with The Times, Vitaly also said, I quote, "The losses we took were massive, thousands. His battalion alone lost half its men." Because at least this time the Ukrainian High Command understood that what they had to do, the priority was to save the lives of their men. And they got them all out before the encirclement. So there's still hope that some of the commanders are still mentally there. Now there's something that I wanted to bring up. During their push north, the Russians haven't been able to close off the cauldron, as most Ukrainian defenders managed to escape. Overall, there were very few prisoners. We're talking about 38 men out of multiple thousands. Now the question is, did the Russians truly fail to close off this encirclement? Or did they allow Ukrainian forces to get out? I don't know. But there's this lesson that we can learn from Sun Tzu. When you surround an army, leave an outlet free. Do not press a desperate foe too hard. The reason is simple. When an enemy force is cornered, they will fight for their lives and will do so with an incredible energy. If you force them to go down in a blaze of glory, they will do so.
Say hello to my little friend!
Taking more of your own troops that you might otherwise expend. This is essentially what happened at the Battle of Mariupol. The Russians didn't want to repeat a 3-month urban street battle and fight block after block. So what was the solution? Remember, Lysychansk was said to be impregnable. The Russians probably knew that if they were to fight for every block of Lysychansk. They would lose their momentum, but they would also lose a lot of infantrymen, which they're already short of. However, by letting the Ukrainian forces slip away, by allowing them to flee, you actually contaminate all the other units at the rear with bad news from the front. Low morale and defeatism spreads like wildfire. Remember the expression, one bad apple spoils the others. And if we go back to the article I mentioned earlier, this perhaps explains the feeling, the sentiment of Ukraine soldiers at Seversk and Bakhmut. Who knows, maybe I'm exaggerating. There's a lot of pictures of Ukraine soldiers smiling, but their morale is certainly not sky high. Certainly not higher than it was 1 month ago. In the end, instead of fighting for Lysychansk for 2-3 months, the Russians got it in less than 7 days. What's the Russian plan after Lysychansk? Currently, the line of contact looks like that. By the time you watch it, it probably would have changed. The Russian command has multiple options. In any case, it's an offensive scenario, because I think that the Russians will try to keep the momentum going and not allow the Ukrainians to recover. As a side note, the Russians just took over the village of Bilahorivka, exactly 2 months after their bloody and failed pontoon crossing operation. Option 1. Attack Bakhmut. The Russians already have many spearheads directed towards the city, with towns like Kodyma, Klinove and Zaitsevo either contested or fully under Russian control. Taking Bakhmut would cut off the supplies of all Ukrainian forces in the sector and would essentially open the gate towards the last Ukrainian line of defense in Donbas. However, Bakhmut has been steadily fortified in the past few weeks, and the city benefits from a central position, Napoleon's favorite defensive posture, which essentially allows the defender to redistribute his forces from one hotspot to another. Bakhmut is also very well supplied by 2 highways that are relatively safe from enemy fire. Option 2. Storm Seversk. Following the chaos and confusion after the battles of Severodonetsk and Lysychansk, with all the exhausted, scattered, and fleeing Ukrainian troops, the Russians could push their momentum and simply storm Seversk head-on. The city is located only 6 kilometers from their advanced positions. There's no perceivable terrain feature or industrial area that could halt the enemy, and all the lines of supplies going towards the city are all within reach of Russian artillery. The Russians could attack in a trident formation from Spirne, Verno-Kamianske, and another one along the Seversky Donetsk River. And just like we have seen in the north of Lysychansk, this operation could be coupled with 1 or more breachheads at the rear of Ukrainian defenses, either at Serebryanka, Zakitne, or Krivaluka. If they do so, we could witness a similar scenario to what we saw at Liman, and the Ukrainians would have no other choice but to withdraw after a couple of days. The problem of this scenario is that it allows Ukrainian forces to further defend and fortify Bakhmut, which could become a real fortress by the time the Russians attempt an attack on it. Option 3. A double envelopment. Certainly a riskier maneuver, but in the wake of the Ukrainian collapse at Lysychansk, the Russians could attempt a bolder maneuver, a full-on assault on both Seversk and Bakhmut, which could be coupled with a concentration of forces right at the center to punch through Ukrainian lines and fall back on both cities. These attacks could be coupled with a strike south of Bakhmut and at the rear of Seversk. This would be a nightmare scenario, but luckily for Ukraine, the heavily industrialized city of Soledar is in the way, and this position strongly favors the defender if they choose to make a stand. Even worse for the Russians, Ukrainians could use Soledar to flank the Russian advance. What will they pick? I think the Ukrainians know, or at least I hope, that this line of defense is far from rock solid, and that it is just a way to gain time, while defenses are being prepared on the line of Slavyansk, Kramatorsk, and Kostiantynivka. What you have to know is that in the past few days, Ukrainian forces kicked out all Russian vanguard units south of Bakhmut, as well as from the outskirts, namely Zaitsevo, Versina, and Kodyma. And just take a look at how many fortifications marked by this blue castle are positioned, located south of Bakhmut. And on top of that, in case of a Russian breakthrough, secondary lines of defense are being prepared beyond Bakhmut, all the way to Kostiantynivka, where additional equipment and reserves are already being sent. So option 1, storming Bakhmut would be difficult for Russia. At the same time, the Ukrainian command seriously reinforced Soledar, with infantry battalions, anti-air capabilities, as well as howitzers, which fired devastating artillery barrage on Russian forces in the sector. So option 3, a push right in the center, would be extremely difficult. That leaves us with option 2. In my opinion, the Russians will certainly try to approach Bakhmut, but currently the main effort would be concentrated on Seversk. It is by far the weakest Ukrainian position in the region. And this is somewhat confirmed by rumors about the last movements of the Russian army. The Russians are actually very close to it, and Ukraine didn't have time to seriously fortify the position. Anyway, not as well as it did with Bakhmut. Again, there's some rumors that some Ukrainian units have already been withdrawn from Seversk and relocated at Bakhmut. The problem is that if the Russians effectively capture Seversk, they essentially turn the entire Ukrainian line of defense. They could strike at the flank and even at the rear of Bakhmut and make the Ukrainian defense of the city very difficult. And I'm not the only one thinking that. Going back to the article to the Times, here represented Sasha, a territorial defense commander. I talked a lot about men like him. They really haven't had it easy. And just every time I think about them, their lack of weapons, the lack of supplies, everything they've been through, it just makes me sad. Anyway, the article says that Sasha rests with his men at a village south of Seversk. He too is keenly watching the battle for Lysychansk. He said, "If it goes, then so does Seversk, and so does this road. Then the capture of the cauldron will be complete, and they will fall back further into Donetsk Oblast." Meanwhile, war correspondent Ignatchenko believes Bakhmut is next. What worries me is that nobody seems to believe, even on the Ukraine side, that they can actually hold this line. So why even bother? Anyway, let me know what you thought of my analysis in the comment section. If you're new to this channel, make sure to like and subscribe. And as always, if you want to support the channel, make sure to check out my Patreon or my PayPal. The link is in the description.